If you've ever added up your savings twice in one night, just to make sure the number hadn't changed since the first time, this story is for you. There's a particular kind of fear that has nothing to do with how much you have. You can feel it with $10 in your pocket or 10 million. It doesn't ask how much you earn. It only asks one question over and over in the dark: is it enough? And tonight, I want to show you why that question can never be answered with a number. Years ago, in a trading town built where two rivers met, there lived a merchant named Devarim, who was, by every visible measure, a wealthy man. And there was a monk who owned nothing at all. One evening, their paths crossed at the edge of the market, and the monk asked Devarim a single question, 7 words long, that the merchant could not answer for 3 days. We will get to those 7 words. But first, you need to understand the kind of man Devarim was, and why that question found the one crack in him that gold could not fill. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. In the comments, tell me honestly, what is the number in your head? The one that, if you reached it, you think the fear would finally stop? You might be surprised how many people are chasing the exact same invisible line. The town where Devarim lived was called Kesh, and it sat at the confluence of 2 rivers the color of tea, thick with silt from the mountains. Boats came down loaded with cinnamon bark, raw cotton, jars of pressed oil, and left loaded with silver. Devarim had built his fortune from nothing, starting as a boy who carried other men's sacks on his back for a coin a day. He remembered the exact weight of that first coin. He remembered, too, the exact hunger of the years before it, the nights his family ate rice water and called it soup. The winter his younger brother's cough never fully left him because there had been no money for the herbalist. That hunger had never really gone away. It had simply changed clothes. Now Devarim owned 4 warehouses along the Eastern River, a house with a courtyard of blue tile, and a ledger book so thick it needed 2 hands to lift. And still, every night, after the servants had gone to bed and the house had gone quiet, he sat at his desk with a single oil lamp and went through his accounts. Not because anything was wrong, because he needed, one more time, to see the number and feel the small, temporary relief of seeing it grow. His wife had stopped asking him to come to bed at a reasonable hour years ago. His sons had learned that the surest way to please their father was to bring him news of a good trade, not news of themselves. He loved them. He would have told you, if you asked, that everything he did was for them. But the truth, the one he never said aloud, was that the ledger had become the only place where he felt something like safety. Everywhere else, the fear followed him, into his sleep, into his meals, into the space behind his eyes when a business rival's boat arrived carrying more than his own. There was a particular ritual to it. Devarim would light the lamp, open the thick leather cover, and run one finger down the columns of ink until he reached the total. For perhaps 10 seconds, something in his chest would loosen. Then, almost immediately, a quieter and more persistent voice would begin listing everything the number did not yet account for. A bad harvest upriver, a rival undercutting his prices, the cost of his daughter's wedding still years away but already worrying him. By the time he closed the ledger, the relief had already drained out of him, and he would tell himself that next season's total would finally be the one that held. The monk's name was Anang. He had walked into Kesh that season, the way he walked into every town, with a single bowl, a robe the color of dried clay, and nothing else to his name. He asked for food once a day and accepted whatever was offered, sweet or plain, generous or scarce, without comment. The townspeople had grown used to him sitting near the market gate in the evenings, watching the boats unload, saying very little. But what Devarim didn't know was that Anang had once been a wealthy man himself. Not as wealthy as Devarim, but wealthy enough to have owned land, cattle, and a name people bowed to in the street. He had walked away from all of it 11 years earlier, and he never explained why to anyone who asked. He simply said, when pressed, that he had found something on the other side of losing it all that no one believes exists until they've stood there themselves. That evening, Devarim was walking home along the river path, his mind occupied with a shipment of cinnamon that had been delayed by storms, calculating the loss in his head before he had even confirmed there was one, when he passed the monk sitting quietly near the old fig tree. Remember this detail. It matters later. Devarim had passed Anang 100 times before without a word, but this time, perhaps because the storm had put him in a fragile mood, Perhaps because something in him was simply tired, he stopped. "You sit here every evening," Devarim said, "with nothing. Doesn't it frighten you?" Anung looked up at him unhurried, the way a man looks at weather rather than at a threat. "What would frighten me?" "Having nothing," Devarim said, "owning nothing. If the rains fail, if the town turns against you, if the bowl breaks, what do you have left?" And this is where everything changed, though neither man knew it yet. Anung was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the merchant a question. 7 words, spoken so plainly they almost slipped past unnoticed. "How much money would make you safe?" Devarim opened his mouth to answer immediately. A man like him always had a number ready, and found to his own confusion that no number came. He thought of his current ledger. "Not enough," some old voice in him said. He thought of double that amount. "Still not enough," said the voice, quieter but just as certain. He thought of an amount so large it embarrassed him even to imagine it, and the voice, thin as a thread but unmistakable, said the same thing it always said. He closed his mouth. He had no answer, and the not knowing frightened him far more than any storm ever had. "I'll think on it," he said, and walked home faster than usual, the cinnamon shipment entirely forgotten. That night, he could not go to his ledger. He sat instead at his window, looking out at the courtyard, and for the first time in 20 years, he let himself ask the question honestly, without reaching immediately for a figure. How much would actually be enough? He tried 100 coins, then 1,000, then the value of the entire Eastern warehouse. Each time a familiar coldness answered back before he could even finish the thought. Not yet, not quite. What if something happens? What if it isn't real? What if it disappears the way it did before? He realized, somewhere near dawn, that he was not afraid of poverty. He had already lived through real poverty and survived it. What he was afraid of was a feeling, an old, nameless dread that had taken up residence in him back when he carried sacks for a single coin a day, and that no amount of silver had ever actually addressed, because the fear had never been about silver in the first place. For 3 days, Devarim could not work properly. His clerks noticed. His wife noticed. He walked to the fig tree each evening, hoping to find the monk. And each evening, Anung was simply there, as if he had never left, as if time moved differently for a man who owned nothing. But what Devarim didn't know yet was that the answer Anung was waiting to give him wasn't a number at all. It was something Devarim would have to feel his own way toward first, because a man who has spent his whole life being told that money is the answer to fear cannot simply be told otherwise. He has to run out of numbers on his own. On the 3rd evening, Devarim sat down beside the monk without being invited, which he had never done before. "I have no answer," he admitted. "I tried every number I could imagine. None of them worked. None of them felt like enough. Now the pace slows here. Listen closely." Anung nodded slowly as though he had expected exactly this. "That is because you are answering the wrong question," he said. "You asked how much money would make you safe. But safety was never something money was going to give you. You were looking for it in the only place you'd ever been told to look." "Then where is it?" Devarim asked, and his voice, for the first time in years, sounded like the voice of the boy who once carried sacks for a coin a day. Anung lifted his empty bowl and turned it slightly in the last light. "I do not fear losing this bowl," he said, "because I never told myself the bowl was what was keeping me alive. Food keeps me alive. Kindness keeps me fed. The bowl only carries what arrives. You have spent your whole life believing the ledger was the thing keeping your family safe. But the ledger was only ever carrying what arrived. It was never the source. And no matter how full you make it, a thing that was never the source will never feel like enough, because you are asking it to do a job it was never built to do." That night, walking home under a sky just beginning to clear after the storms, Devarim understood something he could not have explained to his clerks or his wife in words they would recognize. The fear he had been feeding his whole life did not live in his ledger. It lived in an old, unhealed place inside him that believed, since the day he was a hungry boy, that he was one bad season away from disappearing entirely. No number was ever going to reach that place, because that place did not speak the language of numbers. It only spoke the language of attachment, the belief that his worth, his safety, even his right to exist without dread depended on something outside himself that could be taken away. This is the part of the story that is actually about you. That merchant is you. Every single time you refresh your banking app hoping the number will finally make the tightness in your chest let go. It never fully does it? There's a brief second of relief, and then the mind is already reaching for the next milestone, the next cushion, the next amount that will surely, this time, be enough. That's not a flaw in your character. That's the same ancient mechanism that lived in Devarim, and it has a name in nearly every wisdom tradition that has ever studied the human mind. Attachment. Not attachment to wealth exactly, but attachment to the idea that safety is something you can accumulate rather than something you can only ever practice, moment to moment, inside yourself. The philosophical heart of tonight's story is simply this. Sufficiency, the feeling of having enough, was never a threshold you cross. It is not a number sitting somewhere out ahead of you, waiting patiently for your bank balance to finally reach it. Sufficiency is a decision you make, or fail to make, regardless of the number in front of you. Some people feel it with very little. Some people, like Devarim before that evening at the fig tree, never feel it no matter how much arrives. The number was never the variable. The relationship to the number was, I'm not telling you money doesn't matter, or that ambition is a flaw, or that you should give away your savings and sit under a tree. That is not what happened to Anong, and it is not what I am asking of you. What I am asking is that you notice honestly whether you have quietly handed your sense of safety over to a number that keeps moving every time you get close to it. So here is what I want you to do, starting tonight, with 3 small and very practical steps. First, tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 things that keep you safe which no amount of money could buy or protect. The people who would show up for you in a crisis, a skill you carry in your own hands, the simple fact that you have survived every hard season up to this point. Let your nervous system practice even briefly, resting somewhere other than the ledger. Second, tomorrow, notice the exact moment your mind reaches for a bigger number as the solution to a feeling of unease. You don't have to stop the thought, just notice it, the way you'd notice weather passing. Ask it gently, is this about the money, or is this the old fear wearing money's clothes? Third, choose one small, deliberate act of enoughness this week. Not recklessness, not extravagance, simply one moment where you let what you already have be sufficient for the moment you're in. A meal you don't rush through while calculating. An evening you don't spend refreshing anything. Let your body learn in a small way what Devarim's body had forgotten it was capable of feeling. Picture him now, years later, an old man on the same river path, the light gone amber over the water, his ledger closed earlier than it used to be. He still built and traded and provided for his family. That part of him never changed, and it didn't need to. What changed was smaller and larger than any of that. He no longer asked the number to save him. He had found, sitting beside a monk with an empty bowl, that the thing he had been chasing his whole life was never going to arrive by boat. Anong, for his part, kept walking from town to town, owning nothing, needing very little, and carrying inside him the quiet, unshakable knowledge that safety was never something you could hoard. It could only be practiced. And you, wherever you are hearing this, whatever the number in your own head is tonight, you are not broken for wanting security. You are simply like every person who has ever lain awake doing math in the dark, still looking for it in the one place it was never going to be found. If this story gave you even a single moment of quiet tonight, there are more waiting for you here. Next time, I want to tell you about a king who traded his crown for a single night of sleep, and what he asked for in return when he finally got it. Walk gently, hold loosely,